Gang. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome to this NBA Finals edition of 5 on the Floor Live. I am your host, Greg Sylvander. With me on tonight's postgame show, we have Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket on Twitter. And then also Brady Hawk will be sliding in here any moment. And you can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. So he should be arriving shortly. We will be recapping game 1 of the NBA Finals, which did not go the Miami Heat's way. There were a lot of things we're going to dissect. I think we know that there are some pretty loud things we can look at in terms of the way Jimmy Butler played, and we're going to talk about that, as well as the way they defended Bam Adebayo. Had a great game. Lots of stuff to get into. So we're going to talk about it all. But before we do, I want to tell you about the lead sponsor of every single one of our post-game shows for all of our playoff run, and that is Aggressive Insurance. InsuranceByLynette.com. Y'all know her. She's the biggest Heat fan that's always watching our shows. Aggressive Insurance is an insurance broker agency that's been servicing all of South Florida for over 15 years, offering auto insurance, homeowners, condo insurance, life insurance, also retirement programs, free notary service to all their clients. 954-581-8800. That's the number. If you have a bad driving record, no problem. No driver is refused. Aggressive Insurance, 954-581-8800. The website is insuranceByLynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's. Aggressive Insurance. Check out Lynette. And she's probably in the comments. What's up to her as we go live, and Brady Hawk is now here. That was rough. There were moments where it felt helpless. Then there were moments where I didn't feel as helpless. Actually, early, I felt like that it was going Miami's way to a degree when things were in the 7 to 9 point range. And then, the shooting just never came around in Boston, listen to me. I'm programmed from the last round. Denver started doing things on offense, and you just couldn't stop them. You know where we're starting, though. We're starting with Jimmy Butler. This was a weird game from him. 38 minutes, 6 of 14 from the field, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. So he did some of those other things. But I think people expected him to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, would be one thing. 14 field goal attempts. And also, I just think there was a lot of passing out of what maybe people thought he could rise up and take some shots. Brady, I'll start with you. What was your take on what we saw from Jimmy Butler tonight? I haven't had a chance to check out your takeaways on 5reasonsports.com. Go there for all your free sports content, including Brady Hawk's takeaways. But what was your takeaways on Jimmy Butler tonight?
So it's funny. He comes out the gates and he looks aggressive. Like right to start the game, he gets an offensive rebound, turns it into a baseline jumper. He has a pull-up 3, and it was like, okay, you're getting this version of Jimmy tonight. It was like pretty good sign. And we just didn't see much after that. Like it felt like there was, as a team, and I know we'll get into this from a team aspect, but it ties into the Jimmy thing. They were settling for a lot of deep 2s and pull-up jumpers because the shot's there, which is okay. Like you're getting a clean look, I guess. But there becomes a point in the game where you can't just keep settling for the same pull-up jumper over and over. You have to start getting to the basket, and that's when you look at the number that they had 2 free throws. It's like, this isn't one of those things where it's like, okay, they're not getting calls. It's like, no, they're not putting themselves in a position to get a call because they're not driving to the basket and not even embracing contact. And the reason I bring that up is because that's what comes back to the Jimmy aspect. Like Jimmy needs to be able to control the game around the rim. And this is a team that is not elite with rim protection, especially if you run your motion sets correctly. You can get certain matchups and everything like that. So I just feel like they didn't look for that enough in this game. And it hurts because some of these games when you have Jimmy play like this, it's like, oh, okay, well, they shot 40% from 3. When you don't have that as well, this is even louder on Jimmy's part. So It's kind of the opposite of what we usually do. We're usually talking about Jimmy in the Bam case, and then Bam is usually in Jimmy's place in these games, and they actually flipped. But yeah, this is one of those things. We're going to talk about their shooting. We're going to talk about their defense. But I'm glad you started there because they need more from Jimmy Butler. This is the finals. This is the where you're supposed to lay everything out there. And I know it's game one and it's only one game, and that's why you're not overly worried about this type of game. But this is the point of the season where Jimmy Butler needs to be the peak version of himself. So there's definitely time that he needs to, I guess, regroup for game two because that was not enough.
I wholeheartedly agree. There was also a whole lot of not enough from Caleb Martin and Max Strus, but there was more than enough from Bam Adebayo. So it was an interesting game from that dynamic as you had so many guys that were not playing well, and you would think maybe Jimmy would think that, or I would think, excuse me, as I'm stumbling on my words, that maybe that would prompt Jimmy to put his cape on and play ball, and you just didn't see that tonight. And so that was a weird development in this game and something that I'll be looking forward to in game two. Alex, what was your takeaways? Because so it was basically Jimmy, and then the biggest thing after that from, I guess, most of the perspective of fans, although this kind of leveled out as I'm looking at it here at the end, the 3-point shooting was really bad. It was putrid. I'm going to use that adjective for most of the game. And now it got up to 33%, which actually was better than Denver's 29.6% from three. So that's disconcerting in an 11-point loss. What did you see from Miami's base defense? I'm using air quotes for the audio heads on our podcast feed. Alex, what did you see from Miami's defense that you liked and disliked against Denver, and what amounts for Miami is now kind of a feel out game to some degree as they, try to reload for game two?
Well, I think as far as their defense, I thought they did a pretty bad job in that first half. Just first and foremost, there was so many easy looks for the Nuggets in the first half, and that's exactly what you didn't want to see happen. Was Jokic get going as a passer and just creating these extremely high percentage looks for guys. Some of it was, unfortunate cross matches in semi-transition. Guys like Gabe Vincent getting switched on to Aaron Gordon, and he was able to take advantage every time. Jokic did a great job of waiting for him to seal, kind of throwing it in the right position. And it's just so obvious to anybody watching that these guys know how to play with each other very, very well. I think they had a hard time guarding the Jokic Murray or any sort of Jokic Murray action, whether pick and roll or handoff. I just felt like Murray was able to get a little bit of a runway every time. And so that would lead to overreactions from Bam. And it just feels like they might have to end up sending a third guy there to handle those actions. I'm not sure what the right move is. It would obviously have to be off of a shooter. Off of a non-shooter like Aaron Gordon or Bruce Brown. But, even Bruce Brown made some tonight and was hitting you with floaters. But like you said, for as bad as the Heat shot from three, ended up making 5 more overall than the Nuggets. I know most of it ended up happening in the fourth quarter. That's when the threes really started to fall. But yeah, it is disconcerting because it felt like they were in, they were in control the whole game because of their crisp, smooth offense, and that's kind of what this whole thing was about, right? Coming in was the stylistic differences and who can kind of win their style of play and impose their style of play more often. The Nuggets clearly did that tonight. Like, they looked like the best offense in the NBA. They kind of got whatever they wanted, and even though we both agree that Bam did a very good job on Jokic, and that wasn't the problem. He still went 8 of 12. He still diced you up as a playmaker. He still got all the rebounds, and it's like, what do you do? And so to me, the answer is guard everybody else better. And it's just so much easier said than done, because when the Heat's offense is that bad, and like I mentioned, most of their 3-point shots weren't falling until the fourth quarter. They also shot it very, very poorly from the mid-range, which has been contrary to what they've done for most of the season. They shot 12 of 38 from there. And then on top of that, the Nuggets are just getting all this stuff at the rim, getting easier stuff because of the extra transition looks, because of your bad half-court offense. Kind of everything went wrong today, because I'm a little bit worried about Jimmy, and I'm worried about how they kind of contain these guys going forward.
That's really great point, because when you look around at the entire roster, you really got diced up by Jokic with the passing, and Jamal Murray was on track. Aaron Gordon got all those basically free points underneath the basket. And I thought it was interesting also as Denver kind of kept Miami at bay. They, got up by 17-19 and Miami started to chip away. They were within striking distance of being in striking distance and then being in striking distance again and again. Shout out to Donut Dan on playback for that reference. They only lost by 11 though. And I'm looking at this here and you're seeing guys like Jamal Murray play 44 minutes. And then you look over at the minute distribution for Miami. And I wonder if after the 2 games here, they're going to be able to settle into maybe a tighter rotation. And this is where I'm taking us now. I want to talk about Haywood Highsmith because that was a really interesting development in this game. Everybody wanted to see him late in the Boston series. You got to see him tonight, and he had, as good a finals debut as you could ask from Haywood Highsmith. 7 of 10 from the field, 18 points in 23 minutes. Brady, I'll come to you on this one. Do you think, am I overreacting to say that they could change the starting lineup in game 2? ? And just in the rotation in general, I think that we have arrived at a place where it appears as if Haywood Highsmith needs to play significant minutes. And especially if Max and Caleb are going to look weird like this. I don't know that I expect that from both of them in every game, although Max looked particularly rushed tonight. He looked like he was just too pumped up. But yeah. Brady, do you think that there could be any lineup considerations? We saw no Kevin Love. What are your thoughts on what Spoelstra may do in terms of adjustments with lineups in game 2?
So I don't know if they're going to change the starting lineup, but it's not crazy to throw out there, I'll say. Like in terms of the Highsmith thing, before he even got in an offensive rhythm, the thing I put on Twitter earlier was like, Haywood Highsmith needs to play more minutes, and it's just for the sole reason that he would probably did the best job on Jamal Murray by far for anybody. Like Alex was getting into the Jamal Murray-Jokic pick and roll, which is probably the number one thing that they obviously have to deal with. Like that is just such a tough combo, but there's not a correct answer to it. Like there's like, they went over on the screen, there's a pull-up, they go under, he's going to take the 3. If Bam plays higher, it's Jokic playmaking in the middle of the lane. So there's like, it's such a deadly combo that there's not really a correct answer to it. But Highsmith just does such a good job on Jamal Murray and staying attached to him in a way that we just didn't see from the other guys, where it's like, that guy needs to play more. And then offensively, he's just a good asset in their half-court sets because he's just sitting there just only diving and cutting back door, and it just feels like he's just getting behind the defense for what they do. And I know the big kind of my main takeaway heading into the series was about Bam and the 4-on-3s. Like if Bam gets the ball in the lane and he has to make decisions, he's going to have an advantage. And we saw that in this game because Highsmith just kept sneaking back door and he kept finding him in those little slots. So it's like he's a guy that's definitely going to be utilized. It's a guy when we're talking X factors, we probably should have brought up a little bit more because he's seems pretty important for the series. He was even, I'm mentioning him guarding Jamal Murray. He was guarding Jokic a lot of plays too. Like he's just a versatile player. And obviously that's not a matchup you want to see often, but it's like they can mix things up in that way. And if he's hitting the 3s, and that's why Kyle Lowry at the start of the 4th is why the 3-point shooting went up, the number. But Haywood Highsmith late in the 4th quarter is the reason why that percentage got a little got changed up for the better. But it's if he's hitting those shots, yeah, we're having a total different discussion. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable, but the stuff on the defensive side of the ball 100% is. So it's like that guy needs to play as much as possible. I know we're talking like, yeah, they need to throw size out there. It's like, oh, size. But you also need the correct size because Cody Zeller has size. And that's not a great – those aren't great minutes right now. Like, we know that. So it's like it's a question mark of, like, what direction you want to go in. And Haywood Highsmith feels like that correct direction right now.
Agree, and I think that they'll play more of him. I really was really surprised Kevin Love didn't get a look tonight. I'm wondering if he's not really ailing with the injury. What exactly was it? Is this his back right now that he's dealing with? Back contusion or something like that? I could be wrong. So that's an interesting thing that we're going to watch. But let's talk about one of our other great sponsors, and this is one that's a big Heat fan. If you need mortgage, you go to mortgagebyarash.com. Why do you do that? Because he will get you a quick purchase covered. Competitive rates, down payment options as low as 3%, fast closings, most in less than 20 days. Credit score starting at 620. First-time home buyer programs available. Borrower assistance programs available to help with down payments and closing costs. You need to go to mortgagebyarash.com. That's mortgagebyarash.com, or call 954-651-2057. Again, that's 954-651-2057. Big Heat fan, mortgagebyarash.com. So we talked about Haywood Highsmith as an adjustment. What the hell was wrong with Max Strus and Caleb Martin, Alex? Like, this was a particularly weird game from them too. Is it just as simple with Max as that the threes weren't dropping and just he becomes to a degree non-functional when that starts to go awry? And then what is your take on this no Kevin Love stuff? Because that's where I was going before the break there. And so I'm interested to hear your perspective on why they're not playing Kevin Love.
Yeah, the Max thing is just unfortunate. And I forgot to mention at the top of the show, excuse me for my voice. I'm like very, very sick. And it's gotten worse since I've done playback. So pardon me there. But just as far as Strus, it's very unfortunate, man. Like, he's got to keep shooting. He got a lot of wide open looks and just missed them. I know it's kind of cliche, but that's really what happened. Like, he got some great looks out there that they were setting him up with, and he missed. And then as far as Kevin Love, give me 1 second. I'm battling right now. Sorry, I'm battling.
Game, Alex, on the post-game show.
No, I'm really pausing to mute and cough. But as far as Kevin Love, I want to see how it looks. Not that that'll solve anything. I just think if you're gonna play a backup five out there, I would go with Love. I'd rather have the shooting option. I feel like they're not making Jokic come out and cover ground that much, especially like in those minutes where Zeller was guarding Jokic. And, like I said, on the other side, he's just not a scoring threat whatsoever. He was just planted in the paint. If you have Love out there, I think that'll be better for the Heat's offense, at least, because I don't think there's a big gap between the two defensively. So I'll be in on that. And as far as Highsmith, oh my God, I'm so in on him. Play him 40 minutes, start him, do whatever you have to do. But no, in all seriousness, I don't think he'll start. But man, he's clearly in for a bigger role. Even if this is just like a one game, the only game where he scores like this, I just think the defense was amazing. And the fact that they were able to put together that run towards the end with the zone of all things, because of having Highsmith and Gabe up there, was just incredible. And in or out the zone, he's just an incredible defender. And what he did on Murray was awesome. I would play him more for sure.
So, honestly, coming off of this first game, I am not as it didn't end up being or looking as bad as it felt at times throughout the game. Ultimately, I don't feel like this team completely overwhelmed Miami. The rebounding battle ended up being 45-43 to Denver. That's pretty damn. I mean, you're playing them to a draw on the glass. Like, it really, to me, if this team had shot better from the start, gotten more confident, they wasted a great Bam Adebayo game, 13 of 25 from the field. I saw a comment slide through here about missing easy shots around the rim and stuff like that. He played great tonight. 13 rebounds, 5 assists, only 1 turnover. Played Jokic really well for portions of the game. I think that there's things to build off of there. I liked Kyle Lowry's minutes. I'm looking for the positives because I do not think that today's game was some sort of death sentence for the Miami Heat.
I've got one for you. They took 17 more field goal attempts than the Nuggets, if I'm doing my math right here. So, they won the possession game.
And that, as we look for things to build upon, I think is one that is one to look towards. Brady, what other things for game 2 are you kind of just initial thoughts? Because we'll probably have to talk about this for a couple days. So don't go with all your ammunition. But as we look ahead here a little bit, the biggest adjustments you would make, Brady Hawk, what would they be?
Well, I'll say number one in terms of just carrying it a game two and like having a good feeling after this game or trying to have some type of good feeling is to your point. I felt like they did have great shots. Like it was literally like from the start of this game till they took their guys out at the end. It was like they kept getting the shots they wanted. They had open looks. You mentioned the outer guys like Max Strus. Like not only was he like 0 for 10 at that point, but man, a lot of his threes were like wide open. And it was like different guys it was the shots that you want. And I guess if there was an adjustment, it kind of goes back to the thing I said earlier, like with just that feels like my main adjustment would be, and I'm sure that's going to be at the top of their list heading into game two, is that, yeah, we'll take the pull-up twos because that's an open shot, but we need to attack the basket because not only do you need to attack a lack of rim protection, not only do you want to get better looks inside the paint, but you also want to go at Jokic. Like as much as we talk about like not wanting Bam to get in foul trouble guarding Jokic, how about you try to get Jokic in foul trouble by going at him in the pick and rolls and not just reacting to what he's doing? If you kind of play in that range, now you're not the team that's reacting to them. They have to react to you. And that's why I go back to the start of this where we talk about Jimmy Butler. He can set the tone there. It's not about, yeah, Gabe Vincent can get to the rim, but that's not the guy you want setting the tone there. It's Jimmy Butler that has to do that. And then all of a sudden, then they get in a flow when their shots start falling. But also, I'm not even playing the altitude thing, but it was like, man, all their shots were short. Like they weren't even like, they were just so short on so many of them. And it was like, and I'm not saying the altitude, it's also the fact that, they've been having the rest versus rust conversation. And it was like, yeah, it's a team that just played a 7-game series, probably too. We could throw that in the mix. But yeah, that would be one adjustment. They have to get to the rim more because you just can't rely, I guess, on outside shooting to this degree at this point in the season.
I think that one really good point that was brought up is that Miami needs to try to get to what they like. It felt like Denver controlled the tempo of this game throughout. It was never Miami dictating the pace of the game. And so I think that is some, if we're looking for places that they need to start, that's one place. And I think shooting and Jimmy being aggressive has a lot to do with their offense looking right and them firing on all cylinders. I do also think that there's a chance we see Tyler Hero in game two. I was told that he's ready to go, and it's just a matter of them deciding when they want to insert him into the, into the right game in the right moment. So it could be game two. I think that the coverage that we saw from Denver tonight on Gabe Vincent was probably informative on what Tyler Hero could be able to do against this team on offense. And they need every bit of ammunition they can get. So maybe that could be another thing to look forward to, but they also need to clean up the defense. They need more than Bam and they need more than Haywood Highsmith. Caleb Martin can't look like he is no longer athletic and no longer able to get above the rim for too much of this series. So I think that those are things I'm looking at. Let's go. I'm going to tell you about one more of our sponsors before we close here with a few comments, because I thought there were some great ones that did come through. So we do want to read some of those. I'm telling you about one of our favorite sponsors here at 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's Water Cleanup of Florida. Do you have a water leak and can't find where it's coming from? Call Water Cleanup of Florida at 954-579-0356 for immediate assistance. With over 60 years of combined experience, Michael, Robert, George, and their team are prepared to handle all types of leak detection issues 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. After the leak has been located and repaired, Water Cleanup of Florida will then clean, dry, and fully restore the damaged area. Service areas include Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach County. You're seeing the website right now. That's WCUFL.com. 954-579-0356. Call Michael anytime. That's his personal cell, 954-579-0356. Or you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Check out more than 75 5-star reviews on Google. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you have the schmutz, they have the guts. Alex, final thoughts, and then we're going to take some comments. I just wanted you to get the chance for any low-hanging fruit in terms of adjustments for game two quickly.
I'm not really sure if there are any. Like I said before, I would definitely play Highsmith more. I'm not sure what you do about the starting lineup. I don't have a solid answer there that I feel good about. Like I said before, I would try out the Kevin Love thing. whether as a starter or not, just for little points of time, just to see how it looks, get some info about it. Of course, you trust Spo, you give him the benefit of the doubt. But those are the ones that stick out to me. And then what Brady was talking about before is really important, just winning the battle at the rim or just containing it, because the Nuggets, like I mentioned in the preview pod, got the second most attempts at the rim, in their offense. And then on defense, gave up, I believe, the fifth or sixth most, something like that. And I just don't think the Heat really took advantage of that enough. And a lot of it had to do with Jimmy. I think contain them on the other end at the rim. And then on the offensive end, you just got to make them come out to space and guard more. Like, excuse me again, I'm battling here, but they were reacting to the way that Jokic was guarding out there, and Bam played incredibly out of those 4-on-3s, and Jimmy, like, a lot of times it felt like he was kind of overpassing a little bit. I know some of them were the right decisions, but you've got to be able to beat. Like, if Jimmy is not able to not turn the corner, but be able to get past Jokic in that 4-on-3 coverage and try to force another rotation. Like, he's got to be able to do stuff like that. It can't all just be, there's a pick and roll and then he tries to get in there. They kind of show the extra body and he passes out every time. I think it gets a little bit too predictable. He has to try to beat the coverage and make him rotate another time. But all of this is easier said than done. It's not like they weren't trying to do these things. And yeah, it's game one. You kind of get a whole game to collect the types of shots that they, that they're going to get to, the types of looks they're going to get to. You dodged a lot of bullets tonight with Michael Porter shooting. I feel like he missed some good ones. And yeah, I don't think the threes were the biggest problem. I mean, they were a big problem through the first three quarters, but really, if the Nuggets hit more threes, this maybe is even uglier. I just think it's got to do more with, containing their half-court defense. And you saw what that could look like in the second half. The Heat outscored them by 6, whereas they were down 17 at the end of the first. And I think most of that really had to do with their defense.
For our live viewers, we apologize for these ridiculous commenters that are coming in here saying completely vile things. We apologize for that. We're trying to ban as quickly as possible. That's for the live audience. The podcast listeners, you have the blessing of not having to see any of the ridiculous comments here on YouTube, because you know what? Our fan base has had some great comments tonight, and I want to make sure that we highlight some good comments. So let's bring up a few. Here's Nick Johnson. We can't have another Jimmy game like this, or this series will be over fast. I could not agree with you more. I want to see him aggressive from jump. A huge Jimmy game is what I think we'll see in game 2, and they have to have it. Brady, take the next one.
Every time that he got it down to 10, Nuggets would shoot a dagger. Pretty much. I mean, look, as much as we're going to sit here and talk about it, because I felt like we were going to do this anyway, like in the context of like, man, the Nuggets don't miss kind of the comments, but it's like they haven't missed much this entire playoffs. Like, this has been them this entire run. So this is like, you just kind of have to deal with these type of punches this entire time. So I don't know. It's just the defensively is still my focus. Like, as much as we talk about not being worried, we can sit here and talk about the offense all day. I'm not worried about Jimmy Butler figuring it out. I'm not worried about them missing this many open shots in a game throughout this run. It's still just about them figuring things out defensively. So yeah, those type of punches are the ones they're gonna have to roll with.
We're going to take one more comment here from George Gonzalez. You hold them to 104. I'm trying to help Alex out with his voice here. You hold them to 104. You should win that game. Caleb and Strus, 1 of 17. That's where we lost. I agree with you, man. I think that's two guys that you needed to see better shooting from, and a game where you hold them to 104, to your point. That is kind of the points per game range. And I also think from an offensive efficiency perspective, I'd like to see where this game landed for them on cleaning the glass and stuff like that, and where their offensive rating finished, because it was tracking for a while as one of the worst playoff games that they had been playing so far offensively. And to not get that game does hurt. But they'll be ready for game 2. Remember our sponsors, insurancebylynette.com, A-Aggressive Insurance, Water Cleanup of Florida, mortgagebyarash.com, Prize Picks, use the code 5, Better Edge, 5RSN, that's to get $20. That's our gambling and our daily fantasy sponsors. Adrian has the last question that's going to take us out. This is a good one. Best way to maneuver the Jokic and Murray pick and roll, served on a silver platter to Brady Hawk, and then we're out.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, like, there's not a good answer for it. Like, there's literally, you just have to mix it up as often as possible. Like I said, the only thing that was the closest to them figuring, like, it looking okay was when Highsmith was on Jamal Murray. It looked good. Like, that was the one time because he literally
Great job.
he stays attached to his hip. Like, he really stays with him. Doesn't matter if he goes over or under. Like, he's just there. And if he goes under, his wingspan, his contests are usually like enough. The question is if he can kind of stay in that range, because there was sometimes where he like overhelped down on Jokic and then it was an open three. Like, other than that, he's just been, that's kind of been their only option. But like in terms of schematics, how you deal with it, I mean, Bam's mostly going to be in drop because you cannot switch it, because if they switch it, and we saw that early, like if the Bam, when Bam and Jimmy were in the action, when Jimmy was guarding Jamal Murray, they would switch it and Jimmy would front. They went to that a little bit, but like you cannot go to that for too long. Like,
Not
you just,
a fan of that.
yeah, it's not something you could go with. You have to stay with Bam and drop. I guess the only other question is, do they start, we had the discussion about where Jokic plays in the drop. Does Bam start playing higher in the drop? And maybe it's a little bit of like slight hedge and then recover kind of thing. Like, I feel like those are the little things they can mix in. But yeah, it's just a really tough two-man game to cover. And that's why they're in the NBA Finals. And that's why they just steamrolled the Western Conference.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say as we close is that I also noticed how deep Jokic drops. I mean, he is in the paint for every possession, the entire possession. And so they got to figure out a way to make them pay for that in some way, shape, or form. We'll see how they get there. Thank you for joining us. We will have you covered for game 2. Brady, Alex, Alejandro Villegas on the 1s and 2s. Make sure you're following Ethan J. Skolnick, as I know all of you are, 5 Reasons Sports, and also Mateo Mayorga for coverage on site there in Denver. You'll find us on playback, 5reasonsports.com. Have a great night. Don't worry. Game 2, another one to get. We're just going for the split. Good night.